Hi, everyone. I'm so excited you could join us today for another UVA Club of Charlottesville Zoom event. This club is one of 100 clubs nationally and internationally that reports to the Office of Engagement, and its purpose is to bring programming to the community and UVA alums, parents, and fans. We do many types of events. We do many in person, and we're starting up again. We do athletics, service, book club, and a variety of evening happy hour kind of events. Everyone is welcome. If you're in Charlottesville, please sign up and come to see us. We have a lot of fun. We have toned down events and wild events and just anything, something for everyone. We are mostly, primarily as a group, a scholarship fund. We give a scholarship to a local high schooler every year that's going into UVA. Many times it's the first time going to college student, which is, first person in the family to go to college, which is really amazing because we get to meet a lot of wonderful local kids. Our scholarship link is in the chat. If you want to participate, donate, or just know more about it, tell people about it because we always love getting extra applications. We're in the process now. And this year we are probably going to give away 2, which will be wonderful. Today, we're going to see a film about the restoration and Poplar Forest in general. Our speaker, Mary Massie, is the manager of programming and education at Thomas Jefferson's Poplar Forest. And if you ever get a chance to go down there, you will not be disappointed. The restoration has been going on for a long time. It's an architectural adventure, and you'd be in awe at what has been done. Hopefully some of you will be a second time or a third. Please write your questions in the chat section so I can look at them to be sure that we're not asking Mary at the end the same questions, because the film runs for about 40 minutes. It's not, the volume isn't very high, but you will get a link to see it again later if you like, and it will be a little louder on your computer. Thank you for joining us for this presentation. Mary, if you'd like to, start the film or introduce it, really appreciate it. Welcome.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here, and I hope to be able to see most of you on site and in person soon, now that things seem to be opening up and safe. As Barbara did say, the sound of me talking on the video is a little low. So if you turn up your volume or put in headphones like I have, hopefully that will help. But if not, she'll send you the link so you can rewatch it later. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to put them in chat. We'll watch the tour, which I filmed about a year ago. And then after the video tour is done, we'll pop back on and I'm going to show you some images of some of the restoration work that has happened since I filmed that video. So you'll kind of get a little bit of a before and after of some of features of the house, which should be pretty exciting. So I hope you all enjoy this virtual tour of Poplar Forest, and we're ready to start the video.
Good morning. My name is Mary Massie, and welcome to Thomas Jefferson's Poplar Forest. We're so excited to welcome you here to Thomas Jefferson's retreat home. And I will warn you quickly before we really start the tour that we have some tree cleanup going on the side of our property. So at least while we're outside, you may hear a little bit of that in the background. Don't be alarmed. We're just cleaning up some trees. So this house back here is Poplar Forest. This house was designed by Thomas Jefferson to act as a villa retreat for the 3rd president after his retirement from public service. Now, the land here at Poplar Forest was inherited by Jefferson through his father-in-law in 1773, when Jefferson was just 30 years old. At the time of the inheritance, this property consisted of 4,819 acres of land and also included 11 enslaved men, women, and children. Now, this property, when it was owned by Jefferson's father-in-law, was used solely as a tobacco plantation. So there was no big master house on the property. There would have been dwellings for the enslaved men, women, and children who were working here, and also an overseer's house as well. But the house that you see behind me was started in 1806. It was designed by Jefferson, again, to be used as a retirement retreat after he retired from public service. And so in 1809, when he retired from the presidency, he started coming here on a fairly regular basis. He would usually come 3 to 4 times a year, and beginning in the mid-18 teens, he would start bringing at least 2 of his grandchildren at a time with him. So you'll hear us refer to things as the grandchildren's or the granddaughter's rooms and things in the house, because 2 of his older granddaughters, Ellen and Cornelia, would often travel with Jefferson here to Poplar Forest. Now, when Jefferson did visit the property, he would stay anywhere from 2 weeks to 2 months at a time, often coinciding with work that was happening in the fields. This property continued to be a working tobacco plantation for Jefferson, and at the height of production around 1819, there were roughly 94 enslaved men, women, and children living here working on the property. Jefferson would later add wheat production and also some other crops as well to supplement the tobacco production on the property. So this was one of Jefferson's more profitable plantation ventures, and that's another reason why Jefferson probably wanted to build the house here, was to keep a better eye on what was happening in the fields and with all of the crop production, because by the later in his life he was quite a bit in debt. So he would have been paying great attention to what was going off of the property that he could sell in markets. Now, this property as well, or the house here on the property, is a culmination of a lifetime study of architecture for Jefferson. Jefferson began studying Palladian architecture while he was a student at the College of William and Mary, and he continued to study Palladian architecture his entire life. While he served as minister plenipotentiary in France, he brought back a lot of architectural elements that he had seen around Europe, including some landscape elements that he saw in England when he toured gardens of England with John Adams while he was in France as well. So what you see here at Poplar Forest is a culmination of that lifetime study of architecture. Jefferson bases the architecture here off of Andrea Palladio's Villa Barbaro, which is located in Italy. And you can see here on this piece of paper really how the two mirror each other. Now, the Villa Barbaro, which is the top building here, you can see there's a middle or main building that are stretched out by 2 hyphens on either side, which are 1-story kind of block rooms that end in these 2-story pavilions. And you can see here at Poplar Forest, he's using that same overall silhouette here, but what he's doing at Poplar Forest that's a bit interesting and different is he's actually incorporating landscape architecture in with his building architecture. So we've got the main block, the octagonal brick house behind me, followed by a hyphen onto the east side of the house, which you see with the wing of offices, which is what Jefferson called that. However, on the west side, he does not build a wing of offices, and instead he has this double row of paper mulberry trees that still create that silhouette of a hyphen off to the west side. And then instead of the 2 hyphens going off into 2-story pavilions, he has them go into these mounds of dirt on either side of the property. These mounds were created specifically for the architecture of Poplar Forest, and the dirt for these mounds comes from the south lawn right behind me. As you can see, the south lawn is sunken in, and that is dual purpose. A, you get the dirt to create the mounds on either side of the property, but also it provides access into the lower level of the house that we have access to back here. From the front of the house, which you'll see when we go up there, the house looks like it's only 1 story. But from the back, you can see that it is in fact a 2-story house. This sunken south lawn is a feature Jefferson saw in England. They're called bowling greens. And what Jefferson had here was plants, shrubberies, trees planted all along the perimeter of the sunken south lawn. So from the house, you would look out over this vista at the back of the south lawn. So there would be a nice view. It would draw your eye out to the landscape past the property line where the house is. So Jefferson's really kind of playing with architecture here. He's not being quite as serious as he is at Monticello, his main residence in Charlottesville, and he's just kind of incorporating different things, playing with them, and kind of seeing what happens. So here you've really got kind of a masterpiece of Jefferson architecture. And so we'll move now on into the house. So bear with us as we walk while we're filming. Good luck, Elise, my camera associate. The only bad thing about filming it like this is everyone just has to watch me walk, which is not the most entertaining thing to look at. stop here in the shade for a second. So you can see now that the light has gotten substantially darker on this video, one of the other added benefits of having this double row of trees planted is in fact the immense amount of shade it provides. So the house stays a little bit cooler. You've got a nice place to sit outside if you want to. It's important to note this double row of trees also did exist on the east side of the house prior to Jefferson building the wing of offices. And I believe once it was built, at least one row of the trees still stood where the wing of offices is. So that would have had shade on it as well in Jefferson's day. But you can't feel it because unfortunately you're not here in person. But it is substantially cooler standing here in all of the shade, which is nice as well. So again, Jefferson is using landscape in all of his architecture. He's using it to create sort of a pleasure garden immediately surrounding the house. Here you can see we've got one of 4 clumps of trees that Jefferson originally had planted here on the property. He planted one at each corner of the house. A clump is just a planned growing of trees and shrubs of different heights closely together so that they look like they're a natural landscape feature, even though they're not. They were planted on purpose. And what we found archaeologically when we went to search for the remnants of the original clump of trees is that Jefferson's actually being incredibly methodical while he is planting this clump of trees. So he's actually got them planted in a perfect spiral. They're all set at a certain distance apart from each other. It's all very mathematically proportioned. And so you can kind of envision an enslaved craftsman or enslaved worker out here with a surveyor's chain. Jefferson's father was a surveyor while Jefferson was a boy. And out here working with a surveyor's chain, kind of honoring his father's past, but then working to put these clumps of trees in exactly as Jefferson wanted them. So you can imagine, you know, a lot of these workers were very skilled in their crafts, not necessarily trained in a lot of, you know, sophisticated mathematics or things like that that Jefferson had a big interest in. So I can imagine this was quite a challenge for whoever originally planted it. But we did go down archaeologically, discover exactly where all of these trees were located, this double row and the clump as well. We know exactly what kind of tree is planted where, and we were able to replant them all exactly where Jefferson had them. So these are planted exactly as Jefferson would have had them and would have seen them when he was here at Poplar Forest. We've also got these 5 large tulip poplar trees right behind me. These are all original to the property. We were able to date them back to 1806. But the interesting thing about tulip poplars is the older they get, the taller they get, they hollow out in the center. So 1806 is just as far back as we were able to go. They're likely older than that, but we'll never know exactly how old they are until probably one of them comes down, which hopefully will not happen ever, and certainly not anytime soon. So these were definitely here in Jefferson's day and are original to the property. So they're kind of our crowning glory other than the house itself. We're really proud of these tulip poplar trees. Jefferson originally had about 12 of these that he left when he cleared the land or had the land cleared to build the house. We're down to 5. The ones that have come down came down due to disease, storms, things like that. And when the historic trees did fall, we were able to cultivate and use that wood. So it's being used in the restoration of the house as best we can. So we're not letting anything go to waste if we can at all help it. So now we'll wander up towards this newly restored carriage turnaround surface, and then we'll head on into the house. So Elise is now standing on the original, or a reproduction, sorry, of the original carriage turnaround surface. Jefferson had this carriage turnaround designed and put in here at Poplar Forest. It would accommodate a carriage and 6 horses, so it was a large carriage turnaround, because obviously when you're pulling in with the carriage and a bunch of horses, the horses can't back up. We don't have reverse when we're using horsepower. And so the horses would be able to pull in, drop Jefferson and his family off on the north portico, and then continue around out of the turnaround into the stables. Unfortunately, we have not found where the original stables were located originally, That's something we hope to be able to do in the future. But this is the newest archaeological project that has been completed. The archaeologists actually dug down below a gravel surface that's later dated. They found the original carriage turnaround surface from Jefferson's day. It was made with cobblestones around most of the surface, and then these flatter schist stones that you see that we're standing on right now. The pattern itself of the cobblestones, of course, was not done specifically in Jefferson's day. These were just stones found in fields, would have been brought over just to create the surface. However, when we put in the reproduction surface, we did map out exactly where each of the original cobblestones were, and the cobblestones you see now are placed directly on top of a cobblestone underneath it, so it does exactly mimic the original pattern of the carriage turnaround surface. We also know Jefferson would have had 3 sets of rose bushes planted here at the turnaround. We have located them archaeologically and have plans to replant them soon. So when those are replanted, the entire north side of the house will look exactly as it did in Jefferson's day, really for the first time since the house probably went out of the Jefferson family. So that'll be very exciting. So you can see behind me, we've got the north portico of the house. Jefferson again would have been dropped off right here with his grandchildren. They would have been able to walk right up the north portico and into the house. And you can see from here at the front too, that the house does in fact look like it's one story from the front. Jefferson's doing this to emulate a lot of the fashionable houses he saw while he was in France, where most of those were one story. So he wants to emulate that here. However, he does need some of that extra space. The lower level of the house would have housed the enslaved workers, the free workers who were building the house. Burl Colbert, Jefferson's enslaved manservant, likely slept down there. And it also housed his wine cellar and would have been storage for things that they needed it to be. So he did need that lower level space for storage and extra sleeping spaces. But the main level would have been used as living space for Jefferson and his family. And so with that, we'll head into the house. Because I think I've said we're going to go in the house 3 times, but this time we actually are, I promise. Please don't fall. So you can see as we kind of walk through this first really small chamber, Poplar Forest really is in the middle of a restoration. The house burned in a fire in 1845 when it was out of the Jefferson family. Unfortunately, that fire did burn all of the interior plaster, the woodwork, pretty much everything except for the brick walls and the columns on either portico, because those are made out of brick as well. So when the Corporation for Jefferson's Poplar Forest formed in 1984, our mission was to tear out everything from the house, figure out exactly what Jefferson had, and restore it back to its Jefferson era appearance. We've made pretty good strides in the last 30 or so years working on that project. We're currently in the process of putting all of the entablature and trim work up around the house. This Tuscan entablature was put up in the last couple of years or so, and when we get farther into the house, you'll see where we're currently working on some of that entablature work. So we've made good progress, but again, most of what you're going to see in the house is restoration, and then we'll point out some of those original elements as we get to them. So this room would have been just a small bed chamber, storage if need be. Didn't really have a huge, big purpose to it unless there were more than 2 grandchildren here. However, it does adjoin to the room behind me, which is Jefferson's bed chamber, which we'll go into now. So you can see here in this bed chamber, we have this nice floor plan of the house that's usually kept in that first room, but due to COVID concerns, we've had to move things so people can socially distance a little bit better. So you can see exactly how the house is laid out. So we came in on the north portico through this small bed chamber, and now we're standing on this side of Jefferson's bed chamber and study. Now the lower level of the house has this exact same floor plan. Again, would have been used for sleeping spaces for enslaved workmen, for free laborers building the house, and this center room downstairs would have been the wine cellar. Jefferson would have used this room, as his bed chamber, as a private study. This room would have been the most private room in the house. Most likely, no one would have been in here except for Jefferson and his enslaved manservant, Burl Colbert. We do believe that Colbert would have slept in the room below this, and so in the lower level, we have a setup kind of showing what his bed possibly looked like and where he may have slept. We don't know that for a fact. That's kind of an assumption we're making based on the fact that there is a staircase here that provides access down to the lower level. You can see it's not the most user-friendly staircase. Jefferson doesn't like stairs. He thinks they're a waste of space. And so he puts in these staircases that are not the most accessible. So unfortunately, the general public can't go up and down them. Excuse me. But that would have provided access down to the lower level and upstairs, most likely for Burl Colbert. There is also evidence that Jefferson had his own private privy at the bottom of the stairs as well, another added convenience for Jefferson. There's staircases, there's one on either side of the house because with Jefferson everything has to be balanced and symmetrical. They were not on the original plan. Jefferson actually came here in 1806 when he was president of the United States to help his bricklayer, Hugh Chisholm, lay the foundation for the house. You know, an octagonal house isn't very common today. It certainly wasn't in the early 19th century. And so Hugh Chisholm kind of had difficulty getting all of the angles right and to Jefferson's specifications. So Jefferson came with him, added or helped lay the foundation of the house. And upon that trip, when he got back to Washington, thought a little bit harder, I think, and decided to add a couple of extra doorways in the house and these two staircases on either side of the house, probably because it's extremely inconvenient to walk out the front door and all the way around the house every time you want to get to it from the lower level. So it was probably a more practical decision on Jefferson's part and a very needed one. So you can see here, if you've ever been to Monticello, this room will probably look fairly familiar to you. What we have here in the center of the room is an alcove bed. This is something Jefferson saw in France. He liked them because he says they save space. I think it's also because they kind of break the room up into two. So Jefferson could have a private study on one side, a bed chamber on the other if he wanted to, like he does in Monticello. But just in case you've never seen Monticello or it's been a while since you've been there, this is what the alcove bed looks like when there's an actual bed in place. So Jefferson would have slept in between these two walls. And it does not look like it, but it was long enough to accommodate Jefferson. Jefferson was 6'2.5", and this is just under 6 feet 3 inches. So we know Jefferson would have fit, although we also know that he would have slept propped up on pillows, as people in that day thought that was healthier for your respiratory system. Above the alcove bed is an empty space, just like at Monticello. Jefferson kept his closet in the empty space above his bed at Monticello. Here, however, he doesn't have, as many outfits. He's traveling back and forth between here and Monticello. So most likely this area is only providing access onto the roof. So when we get into the next room, the dining room, you'll see a skylight. And there's shutters that can be opened and shut on that skylight. So an enslaved person would have gone up through a trapdoor here, through this open area above the bed, and then up onto the roof to open and shut that skylight shutters. Now you can also see in this room that it's very sparsely furnished. Part of the reason for that is simply because we're still restoring the house to its Jefferson era appearance. Another reason for that is because we don't know a whole lot about the furnishings of the house. Jefferson wrote extensively about the construction of this house, so we know a lot of information about how the house is built, the timeline of it being built. But when it comes to furnishings, we just don't have a ton of information. We do have a few clues, some letters Jefferson wrote. We have the letter where he commissions 3 dozen of these Windsor or stick chairs. They're painted black with yellow trim, just like Jefferson wanted. We have some tax records showing some other pieces of furniture that he had, and we also have these drawings. So Jefferson's granddaughter Cornelia, who was 16 the first time she came here to Poplar Forest with her grandfather, was learning mechanical drawing from her grandfather. So because of that, she's drawing a lot here at Poplar Forest, especially in the dining room where there's a lot of light. And so we've got some of these drawings of things that she drew that she then wrote Poplar Forest in the corner of. And so we know that there was at least this Windsor chair and a revolving top table. This revolving top table that we have right here is a reproduction of the original, but the original does exist. Monticello has it and it's on display in their galleries. So we know that there were a few pieces of furniture around the house, not necessarily exactly where things were. For example, these stick chairs, we know Jefferson ordered 3 dozen of them. We have remade 3 dozen of them. So there are currently 36 of those chairs in the house. We don't know where they would have been used. And most likely they would have been moved around room to room as need be. So we use them now as sitting spaces for visitors. So if you're here on a tour in person, you could sit in any of those chairs while we're walking through the house, which I think is a nice visitor services feature. So from this room, we'll head into the dining room, which is actually the most public room of the house. So if you had been a neighbor in Jefferson's day, because he did have his neighbors come see him quite often for meals, you would have come directly from that main passage right into this room. Now this room is very impressive because it boasts a perfect cube. It's 20 feet by 20 feet by 20 feet tall, and it's capped in a 16-foot skylight that I mentioned in the last room. So this room would have been extremely, extremely beautiful and breathtaking for people in the early 19th century. They wouldn't have really seen anything like this, and at least not in most private homes. So Jefferson would have had all of his meals here at this elongated octagonal mahogany table. Because the room is not an octagon, he keeps the theme going with the table. It's a 3-section table, so you can take each of the 2 ends off, move out that center portion, put the 2 ends together if you have a smaller group of people coming for dinner, or whatever your need be. It's very flexible space. So at meal times, breakfast would have been served around 8 a.m. Supper would have been between 3 and 4. Those would have been the 2 main meals of the day. Burl Colbert would bring the food in from the kitchen, which is located in the wing of offices off to the east side of the house, through a pantry in the room next door, and then directly into this room, where the food would have been dropped off on one of 2 dumbwaiters that you see beside the table, or on the table itself. Then Mr. Colbert would leave the room, shut the 4 sets of glass doors you see around us, and then meals could be had without interruption and without slaves overhearing conversation Jefferson maybe didn't want them to hear. So again, Jefferson had two of the dumbwaiters here, so one probably would have been on each side of the table. So when there was a larger meal, guests would serve themselves their own food instead of having slaves or servants come around and serve them their own food, which is slightly less fancy than maybe some aristocrats would have been used to. But again, Poplar Forest is not being used for entertainment purposes. You know, Monticello is a very public house that's being designed so that people can come in and really be awed and wowed. And here, Jefferson's really indulging in his own fantasies and things that he really wants. He's not doing things here for other people. So you also see in this room, we've got this nice fireplace in the corner. I really only point that out to let you know that we do believe that is where the fire in 1845 broke out. There's a flue from that fireplace that angles through Jefferson's bedchamber, connects over in the corner of those rooms there. Because of that, it's a very long and very angled flue. It couldn't be cleaned properly, and so we think that's where that fire broke out in 1845. I always joke that now we keep a fire extinguisher in there just in case, because you never know. Although we're not lighting fires in this house anymore, for sure. So, now again, because this is the most public room of the house, the floor pattern is a little bit fancier than you see in the rooms around us. These are white oak floors. This is a herringbone pattern compared to just a tongue and groove pattern that you see in all of the other rooms surrounding this room. Because it's a much larger ceiling height too, we have a much larger entablature that you can see above the door back to Jefferson's chamber. That is a reproduction of what will eventually be here, and this is the part of the restoration that the restoration team is working on now. So rebuilding and restoring that entablature. So if you come to visit in the next year or two, when you walk in this room, most likely there will be scaffolding and men up there working on installing an entablature. At least we hope that's going to happen very soon, because that'll be a big impact on this room. That entablature is 4 feet tall because it has to match up with the 20-foot tall ceilings in this room, and so that'll be very, very impressive when it goes back up. And so now we will move to the next space of the house, which would have been the second most public room. So if you were here were before or after dinner and needed to be entertained, you most likely would have come into this room, which is the parlor. So this room would have been kind of, I call it kind of a catch-all space, but this would have been really the main living area of the house. So Jefferson spending a lot of his time here reading, studying, writing letters. He writes that he could attend to his absent friends here at Poplar Forest. And whether that means all of the books he really wants to read and doesn't have time to at Monticello, or answering letters to friends he hasn't been able to answer, maybe both. You know, a lot of that work is happening here. We know Jefferson had a library of about 1,000 books here at Poplar Forest. Over 400 of those books would have been petite format books. So if you see on that top shelf of the bookcase and those 3 small books that we have open, those are those petite format books. So they would have been pocket-sized books that were easily transportable. Jefferson did read in 7 different languages, and he had books here in all 7 of those languages. At the end of his life, he was even trying to learn German, so he was never content with the amount of languages he knew. He was always continuing to try to learn a little bit more, although I don't think he ever did master German, but he did try. Jefferson's also writing quite a bit of letters, as I said a second ago, here at Poplar Forest. Jefferson wrote almost 19,000 letters that we have copies of. Over 1,500 of those 19,000 talk about Poplar Forest specifically. So again, that's why we know so much about the construction of this house, because Jefferson's not living here full time. He's at Monticello, he's in Washington, D.C. at the President's house. So there's a lot of communication back and forth between Jefferson and Hugh Chisholm, Jefferson and John Hemmings, his enslaved master craftsman, who's doing all of this finished woodwork around the house. And so because of that, we have a ton of information about how the house is built. And we have copies of all of those letters because of this machine we have on the other side of the room. This is called a polygraph. Jefferson did not invent this. He's often given credit with inventing it. He did not. He just probably used it more than most other people in the world in the early 19th century. But I basically say this is kind of an early copy machine. So as you can see, there's 2 pens, each on a piece of paper. So as Jefferson picks up one pen and writes out his letter, the pen on the other piece of paper is making an exact copy as he's writing. So he ends up keeping copies of every letter that he writes once he has a polygraph machine. Now this version is a portable model. It can be folded up and carried back and forth between here and Monticello, which I think is kind of neat. Kind of an early laptop, if you will. I think the most stunning feature of this room is probably the one that's the most obvious, and it is this basic wall of windows that you see behind me. Now from inside, from up here on the 2nd story, looking back out onto the south lawn, you can really kind of see, you know, the stunning kind of backdrop view Jefferson would have had here at Poplar Forest. Now again, in his day, that lawn would have had, you know, shrubs and bushes leading out on each of the sides. Those trees that you see back in the far distance would not have been there. Those were not there in Jefferson's day. There would have been just a straight out view over to fields, mountains, everything out in the distance. Now these windows do provide an insane amount of light into this room as well. These are triple hung sash windows. He uses these at Monticello as well. These can be opened in any manner of ways from the floor up. The center section can be opened or closed, etc. So whatever Jefferson wants to do to create some more space and more airflow and light into the room itself. And this room, because it is the 2nd most public room of the house, the entablature above the doorway matches what you see in Jefferson's dining room. So we've still got the skulls, and then that figure is Apollo, the Roman god of sunlight, who's also reflected in the dining room entablature. We do think the entablature in this room is probably the only thing in the house Jefferson did not see completed before his last trip here in 1823 when he was 80 years old. He came at that time to help move his grandson Francis into the house because he and his wife Mary Elizabeth were moving in and would inherit the house upon Jefferson's death in 1826. So Jefferson saw almost all of it completed. The entablature in this room was completed before Jefferson passed away. He just never got to see it, unfortunately. So from this space, we're going to go into the last couple rooms of the house. They're going to look and sound a lot different. You'll probably be able to hear me a little bit better without so much of an echo. We are not restoring the last 2 rooms, so you really get to see kind of what it looks like underneath everything. So follow me. So you can see looking around the space, I'm sure you can hear it in my voice, how different this room feels and sounds and looks. This room would have been originally the granddaughter's bedchamber. So as you can see, if you can remember back to Jefferson's room, it balances out. It looks exactly like Jefferson's room did. We've got an alcove bed in the center of the room. However, the main difference here is there is access onto the roof of the wing of offices from the side of the room. Jefferson wrote that he liked to sally out with the owls and the bats in the evening time here at Poplar Forest. They would do that. There's a doorway in the stair pavilion on this side that leads right out onto that roof. It's relatively flat. So in the evenings when it's too dark to be out on the grounds, they could still go out for their evening exercise. This wing of offices also houses the kitchen. So when meals were being made, Hannah, Jefferson's enslaved cook, would have been in the kitchen while Jefferson was in residence here at Poplar Forest. She cooked all of his meals. Then Burl Colbert would grab the food from the kitchen, bring it up the stair pavilion on the side of the house, go through this room, and then into the dining room for service. Now by 1817, 1819, when the grandchildren started coming, this setup didn't work too well. There's two teenage girls, or kids staying in the house, and so having someone come through with food into the bedchamber is not always the most ideal for anybody, for the grandchildren or for Colbert himself. So what Jefferson does is he closes off the wall here on this alcove bed and creates an entirely separate room on this side, and this becomes the pantry. So food would have been brought in through here, probably plated for service, made to look presentable, and then taken into the dining room from this space. This would have been a locked room where linens, really nice dishware could have been kept. We know at one point on one trip, Jefferson and the grandchildren get here. Grass has grown up to almost the doors at the wing of offices. It's been a while since they've been here. They can't find the overseer who has the keys to the house. And so Burl has to basically break into the house for Jefferson and the granddaughters. And they write that they weren't able to get into the pantry until they found the overseer because it was locked. So they would have been keeping some of the more valuable items locked in this space just for safekeeping since they weren't here year round. And of course, as you can see looking around, again, we're not restoring the side of the room, and that is so that we can really showcase what everything looks like underneath all of that plaster work. So one of the first things the corporation had to do was come in and really strip everything out of the house, get it down to kind of the bare walls and see what we could find. And when we did that, we found a few nice clues, such as this fireplace right beside us. This is the only original fireplace in the house. It would have been covered up by later owners and then never touched again. So we were very lucky to find this. We were able to restore the other 15 fireplaces in the house back to what this original one looks like. We also found all of these notches in the brickwork. These are called nailing block holes because you can't nail anything directly into brick. They would cut out these notches, insert a piece of wood like so into the notch itself, and then you had something to nail all of your trim work to. So that's how we know exactly where fireplace surrounds, chair rails, and tablatures, where those were all hung, which was also a very nice kind of thing to find. You also see in these rooms these chambers that are carved out of the brick. These are actually later features from when electricity and plumbing were added into the house, so not Jefferson era features. But it is kind of interesting to see underneath all of that plaster work and really see, how all of the walls are constructed, how the alcove bed is really constructed, and really see what it looks like underneath. Of course, people that are really interested in historic woodwork, really love this side of the house. And again, we're going to leave this just as you see it today because we really want to be able to showcase all of the work that the corporation has done to restore the house and kind of give you a sense of what it looks like underneath everything, which you don't get at a lot of other historic houses, which I think is kind of interesting. We have one more interesting thing on this half of the room that I do want to point out quickly, and that is this door. So this door is one of the original walnut doors from the house. We have seen a bunch of the restoration walnut doors, although I haven't pointed them out to you yet. That is a restoration walnut door on the exact size Jefferson would have had. We had all of these restoration doors made based off of this original door that we found. When the fire broke out in 1845, it took about 3 days to burn the house because everything is brick, or almost everything is brick. And so because of that, oral tradition from the Hutter family who lived here at the time say that they were able to take off some of the doors and save them for reuse in the house. Now, why would you save doors? Well, because this is a lot of surface area to pile belongings on and get them out of the house faster. So you get things out quicker. And doors were expensive. They still kind of are. If you're, constructing a house, doors aren't super, super cheap. And so they were able to reuse these. And so then in later years, the doors were actually cut down to fit smaller doorways. So they actually don't fit, the original doors don't fit in any of the Jefferson era doorways anymore. But we were able to send this out to a paint conservator in Williamsburg. It stayed there for about 2 years. We got it back down to its original varnish. And then we were able to restore all of the other doors in the house based off of this one. Again, this is an original door. It would have been made by John Hemmings, Jefferson's enslaved master craftsman, or maybe some of his nephews, Beverly, Eston, or Madison Hemmings, who apprenticed with John Hemmings. And of course, Eston, Madison, Beverly are now considered to be the sons of Thomas Jefferson with his enslaved chambermaid, Sally Hemmings. So we know that those children were coming here to Poplar Forest as well, but in an entirely different capacity. They would have been coming with their Uncle John to help do some of this finished woodwork in the house. And I do like to point that out simply because, without the enslaved labor here at Poplar Forest, this house would not have been what it is. And we can't, discount all of the work, not just for the enslaved and free craftsmen who did all of this work on the house, but those who were working out in the fields and really creating this plantation so that Jefferson could live the life he wanted to. And so we like to acknowledge all of those stories as best we can. If you get to come out here in person anytime soon, I encourage you to. We have an enslaved community talk that we offer on a fairly regular basis, and a room in an enslaved dwelling that dates from the 1850s or post-age Jefferson. But we've got a lot of interesting stories about all of the people that were here, enslaved, Jefferson, the grandchildren. I didn't touch on half of the stories we could tell you about Jefferson and the granddaughters here in the house. So I encourage you to come back and really see the house on your own once it's safe to, or you feel comfortable. We are open 7 days a week, March 15th through December 30th. Right now, tours are limited to about 10 people. Masks are required. I'm not wearing one so that you can all hear me a little bit better. But if you were here in person, I would have one on. Elise is wearing one behind the camera. So we're doing our best to keep things as safe as we can in this kind of COVID world we live in. But please come out and visit us soon. We have self-guided exhibits in the lower level of the house and the wing of offices as well that we're not able to take you on the guided portion of the tour. But I encourage you to come out. We thank you so much for your interest in Poplar Forest and for this tour that we were able to give you today. And Elise and I are on the Zoom call. We're available for questions, so let us know if you have any. And thank you again.
Thank you, Mary. That was wonderful. Wow, I can't believe the difference between last time I had looked at those walls. And I bet you it's even more updated now. I mean, how long ago did you do this? About a year?
That was about a year ago. Yeah.
Wow. When people come down there, do they have hiking trails for them to take to do a hike after they see the house or before?
We don't have hiking trails at the moment. So what many people like in our neighborhood do, our main entrance as it sits now is about, I think it's about 3/4 of a mile. And people will usually come and walk the road in the evenings. Now we are in the process of building a brand new Parkway entrance. And as part of our Parkway construction, we are creating some hiking and walking trails through the 619 acres of land we own. So that is something we are actively in the process of creating on the property.
Oh, that sounds wonderful because people are so into walking
Mhm.
trails now. It's become part of everyone's, family get together time, and what a great way to get them in. One question someone had is about the big lawn in the back.
Uh-huh.
Did you find anything in the letters that suggested what kind of games they may have played in that lawn or anything like that?
We don't know specifically if any games would have been played in the lawn. It obviously is a big open space, so very easily could have been. In Jefferson's day, there would have been shrubberies and trees planted along those banks, kind of at the upper portion of that lawn. But the sunken in part itself would have been just a vast open sort of expanse to try to draw people's eye out past the lawn and to the vista in the distance. So, it's not unbelievable that at least the granddaughters wouldn't have been out in the lawn, maybe doing some games or running around a little bit.
Yeah, you would think so, right?
Yeah.
Because there are so many different things they could play. When you were showing us the trees in the front and the side,
Mhm.
somebody was wondered what happened to the boxwoods.
The boxwood, we did extensive archaeological investigation about them, and we know for a fact that they were planted after the 1845 fire. So they were not there in Jefferson's day. So they were removed so that we could restore the landscape to its original Jefferson era appearance.
That's wonderful.
Mhm.
I mean, a question that I have that I'm sure other people are thinking is, how far along has it come now since the last time you did this video?
It is here. I will show you. I just have a quick little PowerPoint with 4 slides on it. Okay, so this is what the dining room currently looks like. You may remember from the video, I know it wasn't that long ago, but up here where this entablature is, that was all brick, just exposed brick in the video from a year ago. And so over the last little over a year or so, our restoration department made over 2,000 individual parts for this dining room entablature. It was all handmade using techniques Jefferson's workmen would have had and would have used. That's all been installed. That was all installed sort of at the end of 2020. And then they're currently finishing up these pediments over all 4 of the doorways. So the interior of the dining room looks and feels much differently than it does in that video that you all watched. Um, this is an example of one of the ornaments that will be on the dining room entablature. So the entablature itself will be decorated in ornaments of Apollo's skull, which is what this is, Apollo's face, the Roman god of sunlight, and a bucrania, which is an ox skull. And these are, again, modeled off of the Baths of Diocletian that Jefferson studied from Rome. We were able to actually study some of the ornaments at the University of Virginia and make this 3D printed model off of ones from UVA. So we're very, very excited about it. These should be installed hopefully sometime in the next few months. So the originals Jefferson had were made of terracotta, and these sort of ribbons that come down off of Apollo's face would have been made out of lead. And there's really no way to make them today much differently. These would still have to be made from lead. So we're not going to go that route. They'll all be 3D printed because, of course, they're 20 feet in the air, so no one will really know. But we're really, really excited about the progress that's been made in the dining room itself. And then this is obviously the outside of the house. So you can see here where we've restored the oval bed of roses in the center of the turnaround. So Jefferson had one in the center, one off to the west side of the house, and one off to the east side. And those have all been restored earlier this year as well. They have some protective fencing because we're in Central Virginia and the deer are rampant and they really want to eat them. So the fencing itself is not a Jefferson era feature, but those oval beds of roses are replanted exactly where Jefferson had them originally, which we're really excited about. So this is kind of what the interior and exterior restoration, sort of the newest projects that they've worked on. And then I have an image too to just show you of that new Parkway construction. So as you can see, this is going to open up just a ton of our property. They've been clearing out trees. This new entrance road will be 2.2 miles long. It'll cut through most of our property. So the road that's there now is not a Jefferson feature. It was put in by later owners. This is actually going to mirror a road Jefferson had planned to build to Poplar Forest. I don't think he actually did ever construct it, but we're mirroring the road Jefferson wanted to put in place. And this road will be a two-way street. It's paved, not gravel. So if any of you have been to Poplar Forest ever, you will know that The property is not always the easiest thing to find. We're sitting kind of in the middle of a residential neighborhood due to just some development in the mid 20th century. And so we're hopeful this will sort of make things a little bit easier to find. So you can enter and leave in the same direction, which we're very excited about. And we hope to have this road in place, I think by the end of the year is what we've been told. So it's been a really quick process. There's a lot of change happening on site, which is really exciting to kind of see. So anytime you come out onto the property, there's always something going on, whether it's road construction or historic woodworking happening in the house. So it's a really interesting place to visit and to work at.
Thank you. That sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
If you have any other questions out in the group, please type them on the chat section so I can ask them. My question for you, Mary, also is, how are you going to share rather this house now that we're coming out of this craziness and you want to have more people there? Will there be picnic areas for people to come and see the house and stay with their families out? Obviously not in the house, out in the open.
Right.
Events, music things, chamber music, tea like they have at Monticello. What can we expect?
Yeah, Poplar Forest is back operating for like our regular schedule. So again, like I said in the video, we're open 7 days a week until December 30th, except for some major holidays. We have picnic areas that have been in place for years at the back of the South Lawn. So you can come bring a picnic lunch, make a day of your visit to Poplar Forest. There's a ton of self-guided things you can do. We have tours 4 times a day, docent guided tours. They're still limited to 10 people per tour, just so we can have social distancing as best as possible. Although we have eliminated our mask mandate. So we're following the governor of Virginia and the CDC and saying that only unvaccinated people should wear a mask while they're on property. So you can come and take a tour if you want to. If you don't want to take a guided tour, we now have a self-guided option. So we actually have a new app, a smartphone app that we developed that premiered in April around Jefferson's birthday. And so you can come and tour the house on your own, and it's a audio tour. You can listen to it. It's me giving a slightly different tour than you watched me giving the YouTube video today. But that gives you an opportunity to still see the house, even if you don't have time to go on a guided tour, or maybe all of the guided tours are full. You can still get a tour of the house just sort of on your own. So we have plenty of options for people if they come to visit.
That really sounds wonderful. I look forward to seeing all the work in person. I'm really excited about that, and really appreciate you coming to share this with us. This is really special, and I hope everyone at home appreciated it and saw something new that they hadn't seen before. For those of you who have never been, I hope it was enjoyable, and sorry about the quality of the video. We have there's a few ways that it could have been better, but not with using the internet the way it is. So sorry about that. The tour video will be provided to everyone that attended in a follow-up email. So that way you can go back and look at pieces and freeze them and look at them better for yourself, or with, somebody that, you have at home that may not have seen it. Mary, I appreciate you stopping by and talking to us about it. Thank you, everyone. It's amazing that everyone stuck with us from beginning to end, and I really, really thank you, and I really appreciate everyone's attendance, and I wish you all the best.